It's Johnny Two-Face here, back with another reaction video. This time I'm reacting to Arab Invasion of France, Battle of Toulouse 721 medieval documentary by Kings and Generals. Now, if you haven't reacted to the other episodes of this early Muslim expansion series, I suggest you check them out before checking this one out. And the usual disclaimer when I react to anything historical, if I don't show so much what is considered a proper reaction, is excuse me, itchy nose. Not that. Is that it's probably obvious I don't know much about the subject, and if I do know anything, I'll most likely pause the video to give my input, or hopefully ask any curious questions which hopefully will be answered in the comments below. With that being said, the link to the original video will be in the description down below. Please go and subscribe to Kings and Generals, another great history channel here on YouTube, and excuse me, and by the looks of the playlist, we're coming toward this is the second to last episode in this series, so let's not waste more time. Let's get this up on screen and see what... Oh, sorry, captions on. Right. Let's see what happens in this one. God, I'm really itching now.
In the previous video, the short reign of the paranoid Caliph Suleiman
saw
a massive invasion of Constantinople end in catastrophic failure, and the deaths of many of the great generals and conquerors that had expanded the Umayyad Caliphate.
Yeah, because he was more focused on aiming from the front, but wasn't on Suleiman. Sorry, learn to remember names. Yeah, didn't think about what could be attacking him from behind, especially outside the western walls of Constantinople. Or shall I say, yeah. Sorry, I'm tongue twisting myself here. Yeah, outside the walls of Constantinople, they're double walls, which apparently didn't fall until, well, have never fallen, even though Constantinople was infiltrated before, from if memory serves, by some warriors of Attila the Hun, but that was just a rumor. But going slightly off subject, going off subject basically. The Huns extorted them to make them stay away from Constantinople, which, as you probably all know now, is modern day Istanbul. But yeah, Suleiman is probably one of the was probably one of the most paranoid caliphs in this series that I've heard of in this series. So, sorry for the long pause then, of course, the number of times the Caliphate has faced numerous uprisings within its own empire, is probably the best way to do it, and also trying to defeat the Dabuyids, and also their failed attempts to take on Nubian with their famous archers of 1,000 eyes. Hopefully I remembered that right. And also in the last episode, I remember talking about the details of how they've invaded Spain, and the Visigoths in Spain were really unprepared, and their feudal system wasn't really effective, and it just led them to be easy prey for the Arabs. So. And basically this is what was left of the Byzantine or Eastern Roman Empire, which is not really an empire as such, but still. Anyway, I've waffled on too long.
To its greatest extent during the reign of his predecessors. In this video, the reign of Yazid II brings further setbacks and fragmentation as the weakened Umayyad Caliphate stumbles through its final years. This video was kindly sponsored by our YouTube members and patrons. Right now, the patrons and YouTube members are exclusively watching our First Punic War and Pacific War series, while the series on the history of Prussia and Italian unification wars, Risorgimento, have been concluded, and the series on the Russo-Japanese War and the Albigensian Crusade and Xenophon's Anabasis will be released next. You can join their ranks via the links in the description and pinned comment to get exclusive videos, early access to all public videos, see our schedule, get access to a special Discord server where we're very active, and much more. Thanks for supporting us. We couldn't be doing it without your help. Following Suleiman's death and the end of his disastrous period as Caliph in 717, the Caliphate was granted a brief reprieve from its troubles through the mostly peaceful and uneventful 3-year reign of Umar II. Despite a small Iraqi Kharijite rebellion in 718 seeing some initial success against local forces, Syrian troops swiftly put it down under Umar's cousin Maslama ibn Abd al-Malik, and the frontiers remained mostly quiet during Umar's brief reign, and the attempted political and social reforms he championed. As seen in previous episodes, numerous revolts against the Caliphate had come about due to the poor treatment of non-Arab converts to Islam, or Mawali. Rebellion among Persian-speaking Iraqis had threatened to topple the Umayyad dynasty twice, under Muqta al-Thaqafi during the Second Fitna, and Ibn al-Ashaf in 700 AD. And Iberia was plagued by ongoing strife between its Berber and Arab conquerors. Umar made efforts to address this problem, making all Muslims exempt from the jizya tax, rather than Arabs only, which, coupled with expanded missionary activity to encourage conversion in his still minority Muslim empire, brought some degree of improved cohesion and stability, at the cost of cutting into the Caliphate's tax revenues. However, several events during his reign would have long-term repercussions. First, the Caliphate met its limit on its far eastern frontiers, where the Arab holdings in Transoxiana became the battleground against a new rival in the form of Tang China. The Caliphate's holdings in the region were recent conquests brought about by Qutayba ibn Muslim, who had since been a victim of Suleiman's purges, leaving the distant frontier bereft of this popular and skillful leader. Thus, when the Arabs were drawn into an ongoing conflict between the Tang and the Tibetan Empire as a Tibetan ally, it would soon spell disaster. The caliphal vassal Khan Suluk of the Turgesh's invasion of the Tarim Basin would meet staunch opposition from Ashinashan, a leader amongst the Western Turkic Khaganate and a commander of the so-called Protectorate General to pacify the West. Despite both the Arabs and Tibetans sending significant reinforcements for this offensive push, and holding a numerical advantage, the mostly Turkic Tang-aligned force opposing them would win a decisive victory, breaking the siege of Aksu, while another Chinese force simultaneously defeated the Tibetans along the Yellow River, assuring Chinese dominance in the region for the next few decades. Suluk, for his part, promptly switched to the winning side and swore fealty to the Tang after his defeat at Aksu, even going on to attack his former overlords in Fergana, a poorly defended region. There was little support from the Caliphate's core to be found on the frontiers, for reasons we will soon cover. However, this period did see success in Al-Andalus, where Governor Al-Sam ibn Malik had managed to bring most of the Arab-Berber infighting under control, allowing him to capture such major holdouts as Barcelona and Narbonne from the Visigothic remnant under King Ardo in 719, with the aid of Syrian and Yemeni new arrivals.
Well, the thing is, now that the Caliphate has got its own navy, it's easier for them to supply. They don't have to really go through Africa, and if they could probably go by sea to resupply their army. But I think most of the time they would choose to travel through Africa, then up through the southern tip of Spain to go into France.
The minting of the first Arab coins in Iberia, marking their gradual transformation from a mere occupying army to the vibrant hybrid civilization Al-Andalus would later become. Closer to home, the rapid succession of caliphs was creating its own problems. Among them, the arrest and later escape of Yazid ibn al-Mahalla, formerly
Oh, yeah, I was about to read that as the revolt of Yazid ibn al-Mahalab.
Governor of Iraq
I'm surprised I pronounced that
and
properly.
the leader of the ambitious and increasingly powerful Mahalabid family. Over the previous decades, the prestigious position of governor of Iraq had come to hold power almost rivaling that of the Caliph himself, given its traditional oversight over all of the Caliph's eastern provinces, making the stance of Iraq's governor a major factor in any thorny or contested caliphal succession, such as those of Suleiman and Umar. Umar and Ibn al-Mahalib had bad blood between them already when Umar took the throne, and the governor knew he only had worse problems ahead should Umar be succeeded as caliph by Yazid ibn Abd al-Malik, whose in-laws from the family of the renowned former governor al-Hajjaj had been tortured and executed on Ibn al-Mahalib's orders during a previous political power struggle. Thus, after being recalled from his governorship and arrested for withholding from the Caliph the spoils of war from his difficult Tabaristan campaign during Suleiman's reign, Yazid ibn al-Mahalib opted to escape prison with his family's aid in 720 and returned to Iraq as Umar lay sickly and dying, rather than trusting himself to the mercies of the coming regime. Umar's death in the same year brought Yazid ibn Abd al-Malik to the throne as Caliph Yazid II. Thus, the all-too-short years of peace under Umar were brought to an end, as Yazid was immediately forced to contend with a Mahalibid rebellion in Iraq. However, not all challenges to the caliphate would be as open or as blatant as those of the Mahalibids. It was during these same few years that Muhammad ibn Ali ibn Abdallah ibn Abbas, the patriarch of another important family based in Khorasan, first began to spread anti-Umayyad propaganda and build a network of support around a...
Yep, that's the thing with propaganda. Whether it was true or not, but lies do seem to travel faster than the truth. But whether it's true or not, you'll have to decide that.
Demand for rule by blood relatives of the Prophet. And while his and his family's efforts on such a distant frontier attracted little attention from the Umayyads in Damascus at the time, the name Abbasid would soon be known throughout every corner of the caliphate.
If you haven't seen it on my channel already, I've already reacted to the first video by Epic History TV about the Abbasids, so feel free, after watching this, feel free to check that out, because after this series is done, I think I'll make the other Abbasid video by Epic History TV the next one after I finish this series up, so feel free to check that out.
The new caliph would take no half measures against Ibn al-Mahalib upon learning of his escape and subsequent refusal to swear fealty. And even before any armies had met in battle, he took steps to undermine the influence of the Mahalibid family. 3 brothers of the rebellious former governor were arrested and imprisoned, despite having not directly participated in their brothers' acts of defiance, deepening the rift. Meanwhile, Yazid ibn al-Mahalib travelled as fast as he could to Basra, where other relatives of his were among the prominent nobility and joined their own forces to his to create a formidable army. This began a standoff with the local forces in Basra, with the Mahalibids demanding the release of their imprisoned kin and spreading bribes among the defending soldiers in Basra to weaken the defenders' resolve and attract more support in their opposition to the caliph. The dwindling defenders under Adi ibn Attat attempted to hold the city, but were defeated piecemeal, with part of the army splitting from the main body to hold the city's western caravan quarter. Though whether this was due to a breakdown of authority among the demoralized defenders or a poor strategic decision on Attat's part, this force would be attacked and routed from the city before the main confrontation began. The remaining defenders eventually rode out from the fortress to engage the Mahalibid besieging force in a nearby cemetery. But despite the staunch corps of Syrian horsemen bolstering the local forces, they were soon defeated as well, with the rebels pushing past them in the confusion of their defeat to seize the fortress, capturing Basra and rescuing Yazid ibn al-Mahalib's imprisoned brothers. Though Caliph Yazid II's reign had barely begun, he already faced a serious challenge to his rule. Sparing Adi ibn Attat, the victorious rebel began appointing his own governors in the territories around Basra, while tribal leaders and army commanders loyal to the caliphate fled to Kufa and Syria. Interestingly, it seems the conflict very nearly reached a peaceful conclusion at this point. one of these retreating tribal leaders, Al-Hawari ibn Ziyad, came across 2 messengers from the Caliph escorting Yazid ibn al-Mahalib's nephew and a generous peace offer. The new Caliph apparently valuing stability over any family feud and willing to return Ibn al-Mahalib's relatives and governorship. However, Ibn Ziyad argued against this, informing the messengers of Artad's defeat and insisting Ibn al-Mahalib could not be trusted, convincing them to turn back. Ibn Ziyad's own family rivalry with the Mahalibids may have played into his actions, as Ibn al-Mahalib's nephew, Humayd, suggested in his pleas to the messengers to continue on to his uncle. But whatever his reasons, he ensured through a few words that the civil strife would continue.
Wow.
However, despite Caliph Yazid's reluctance to do battle, the advantage was nevertheless his. While the Mahalibids had secured the support of most of the tribes and army commanders in Basra, aided by lingering resentment towards the caliphate lasting since the tyrannical reign of al-Hajjaj, they had been too slow to seize control in Kufa before its reinforcement, despite the prominent places many members of the dynasty had held in the region. Thus, after some skirmishing against General Maslama ibn Abd al-Malik that saw the Euphrates crossed and the Al Jazeera region retaken by Umayyad forces, Ibn al-Mahalib left Basra with its treasury in hand, intending to march to Kufa. An advance party of Maslama's army sabotaged the canals south of Kufa, however, creating a flood that cut the Mahalibid army off from their destination, as well as from any possible reinforcement from Kufan supporters and family members, and leaving them stranded near Karbala in August 720, where Maslama's main force would catch them on August 17th. An initial engagement set the tone of the battle, with an advance force near Yazid's brother Abd al-Malik ibn al-Mahalib initially driving back the Umayyads' own advance party under al-Abbas ibn al-Walid and nearly claiming victory, only to be routed when the Syrians managed to rally and regroup with the bank of the Euphrates at their backs. Abd al-Malik would regroup with the rest of the army, digging trenches to fortify their camp next to a bridge across the Euphrates, and stationing part of the army on the opposite bank to protect a line of retreat. However, these precautions would not save the Mahalibid rebellion when the battle was finally joined. According to the sometimes unreliable testimony of the historian Abu Miknaf, Yazid ibn al-Mahalib favoured a night attack on the Umayyad camp to fill in the Umayyads' own trenches under the cover of darkness and prepare for a decisive assault at daybreak, but was overruled by the chiefs and leaders among his army, who insisted they abide by the terms of honourable combat under the Quran they had agreed upon with the Umayyads prior. Yazid disagreed, claiming the Umayyads were unlikely to show the same chivalry. This odd episode is likely coloured by Abu Miknaf's anti-Umayyad biases, but the battle itself bore out his supposed warning, with the Umayyads opening the full-scale battle on August 25th by sending a force in small boats to set the bridge ablaze and divide the Mahalibid army. On top of cutting off a line of retreat and stranding some of Yazid's forces on the opposite side of the river from the battle, the torching of the bridge was already enough on its own to cause many of Yazid's questionably dedicated soldiers to break and attempt to flee, only to be rounded up and beheaded as an example on their own commander's orders, leaving the Mahalibid ranks in chaos before the first blows were even traded. A greater blow would be the death of Yazid's brother, Habib, who commanded the Mahalibid right flank, and perished early in the battle. The death of his brother, combined with the other setbacks and pressing defeat, seems to have unbalanced the elderly Mahalibid leader, whose words and behaviour following are marked with a single-mindedness bordering on madness. Dismissing advice to retreat to Wasit, he pressed on with the remains of his wavering forces, charging straight for the Umayyad centre, where Maslama was camped.
I was about to say, that's a suicide, because if they wavered, I'm not an expert, but they could just turn around and pretty much surround and capture Yazid, most likely just kill him on the spot. But again, I'm not an expert, so...
With little care for manoeuvre or nuance, the greater Umayyad numbers and Yazid's seeming death wish made the outcome of the battle certain. Yazid and his companions clashed with Syrian cavalry until their defeat, with a warrior named Al-Kal ibn al-Ayash fighting his way to Yazid, whereupon the two men dealt each other fatal blows. another of Yazid's brothers, al-Mufaddal, commanded the left wing with more skill and discipline, and even saw some success after the routing of the rest of the army. But when news reached him of the deaths of his brothers and the flight of his allies, he fled the battlefield, the decisive battle ending whatever threat the Mohallabids posed. The immediate aftermath of the rebellion was nearly as bloody as the battle that preceded it, with both sides vengefully executing whatever prisoners they had, including Adi ibn Attat in Basra and numerous members of the Mohallabid family that had been arrested at the rebellion's inception, while Maslama, taking over as governor of Iraq, pursued the fleeing al-Mufaddal and other prominent rebels to Fars, where they were finally slain. Though quite large in scale, this rebellion was fairly short-lived, and its impact on history would likely not have been great if not for the previously mentioned Abbasids building support for their own ambitions. With the power of the Mohallabid family broken, its loyalists and more distant kinsmen, not caught in the purge, pledged their still respectable power to the Abbasids, and the family would return to prominence in later decades as vassals to another caliphate. Thus, this rebellion is somewhat more significant as one of the several leading into...
By the looks of it, the Umayyad Caliphate seems to be more long-lasting, even more than the Rashidun. I hope I said that right. I should really have noted down. But anyway.
The third fitna. The Umayyad victory only bolstered the strength of tomorrow's enemies.
Yep.
For now, though, as the Abbasids bide their time and the deteriorating Arab possession in Transoxiana sees fighting rock Samarkand, our attention returns to Al-Andalus and southern France. The previously mentioned Andalusian governor, Al-Sam ibn Malik, now more secure in his new holdings and reforms, chose in early 721 to continue the conquests of the Umayyads further northwards into the lands of the Franks, gathering an impressive army, likely 10,000 to 15,000 strong, even if the 6-digit figures given in Frankish accounts are dismissed. On top of bringing further prizes and revenues for himself and the Caliph by his conquests, Al-Sam seems to have rushed into further outward expansion, in part to keep the fragile harmony within Al-Andalus, hoping the Arab and Berber soldiers and settlers so recently at each other's throats could come together for plunder and holy war in France, rather than returning to their infighting at home. Narbonne was established and provisioned as the forward base from which the campaign would be...
Similar sort of things that every empire has done, or, you know, political leaders have done, is when they're in hot water with their public, sometimes they'll go to a conflict just to distract the people. But this is sort of slightly the case. But I did. But I did hear that the Muslims, or Arabs if you want to call them that, you choose which one you want to call them. I know they lost at France. I think it was I'm trying to think, at Tours. But I still want to see how that played out. But sorry, I don't know why I said it like that, but this will be interesting to see what happens when the Arabs first went into what is now modern-day France. Or the Romans used to call it Francia.
Be launched, while to the north, Duke Odo of Aquitaine gathered forces of his own and sent out calls for aid. Though the exact date of his advance into Francia is unclear, it coincidentally seems to have taken place very shortly after the death of the Frankish king Chilperic II, leaving Francia technically under the rule of Theuderic IV, an 8-year-old boy. However, this was far less significant than it might sound. Real power was held by the steward, Charles Martel, who held the rather odd title of mayor over all the Frankish kingdoms after his victory in a many-sided struggle.
I can't remember if it was Charles Martel that was first called Charles the Fat. Slightly off topic, but still. Or is that a different Charles?
that had started as a civil war for Charles's native Austrasia. When Chilperic, then king of Neustria, had attempted to take advantage of the chaos and jointly invaded with King Radbod of Frisia, their opportunism backfired, with Charles eventually defeating not only his Austrasian rival, Plectrude, and the invaders, but also the previously mentioned Oddo, who briefly joined Chilperic as an ally once the Neustrian king's war was a defensive one. Finally betrayed by Oddo and delivered into Charles's hands, Chilperic surrendered most of his authority to Charles, being elevated to become king of all the Franks in name, but in truth serving as nothing more than a puppet, less than 3 years earlier in 718. Chilperic's passing and the crowning of Theuderic by Charles removed any lingering internal threat to the steward's power, and allowed him to consolidate his hard-won position. But despite this new security, Charles would not be coming to answer his former enemy Oddo's call for reinforcement. Though Charles Martel would become famous throughout Europe for his later efforts against the Moors, at this point, his efforts were still focused on fighting the invading Saxons, and it's likely that seeing his powerful and functionally independent Aquitanian vassal weaken was to his benefit as well. Oddo would thus be forced to stand alone against Al-Sam's invasion, though he would prove himself far from helpless. Initially unopposed as they left Narbonne in spring, the Arab and Berber force arrived at Aquitaine's largest city of Toulouse in early March of 721, their momentum halting as they settled in for a siege, but with the advantage seemingly still on their side. But the 3 months the cavalry-heavy Muslim army spent waiting outside the walls of Toulouse robbed them of the advantages in speed and mobility that had allowed such rapid conquests in Spain, and it seems Al-Sam may have allowed himself to become complacent, while Oddo assembled his army of perhaps 8,000 to 12,000 soldiers, not expecting significant resistance after his string of easy victories against the remnants of the Visigoths. In an apparent failure of scouting, despite his access to thousands of skilled horsemen, Al-Sam allowed Oddo's army to march south of Toulouse by the beginning of June, cutting the Muslims off from Narbonne and trapping them between the field army and the besieged city's garrison. As with so many other battles turned into myths to glorify a religious victory, the exact events of the battle that erupted on June 9th are difficult to pin down, with both sides claiming absurdly inflated army sizes in excess of 300,000 for their enemy. What is clear is that after a skillful encirclement of the besieging Muslim force by Oddo, the defenders of Toulouse took a bold risk in sallying forth to join the battle in the field. To their credit, the Muslims did not quickly break or rout, despite their disadvantage and the simmering distrust still felt by many along the Arab-Berber divide. Rallying around Al-Sam, they fought a dogged last stand, even after their leader's mortal injury, and after hours of fighting, a portion of the army even managed to break the encirclement and escape to Narbonne with the injured governor. With their mobility advantage nullified and enemies on all sides, though, this brave stand did little to change the inevitable outcome, and the majority of the Muslim invasion force was either taken prisoner and ransomed or perished in battle on the bloody fields outside Toulouse, while Al-Sam succumbed to his wounds in Narbonne not long after. This would not be the last attempt of the Umayyads to invade France, but Toulouse was nothing less than a disaster for the Umayyads, particularly with the dangers posed by a revanchist rival kingdom so close to home. The recently founded Kingdom of Asturias, ignored for their defensible terrain and comparative poverty in favour of more lucrative targets in France, would win its own first victory against the conquering Umayyads the following year at Covadonga, a relatively small-scale but historically significant skirmish marked by many today as the beginning of the Reconquista, which we will cover in a separate series. These developments, together with the growing power of the Abbasids in Khorasan, represented many pivotal events and transformations in their infancy, and the dawn of a new era just around the corner as the sun began to set on the Umayyads. Our series on early Islamic history will continue, so to ensure you don't miss that, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently, we've started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their...
And that'll do it. This has been another interesting video by Kings and Generals, and yeah, so definitely seeing the downfall of the Umayyads and hopefully the rise of the Abbasids by the looks of things. So there's not much more I can add. So if you like this video, please like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.